into the party wagon and hold on to your pizza. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Epic Tales from the Sewers. I am your host, Justin. This is an excerpt from a meeting that I had this past year at C2e2 in Chicago. I was invited to be part of an all-press panel for Kevin Eastman, and this is going to be the recording from that. I did show up just a little bit late because they changed the rooms on us, so as we were walking in, everybody had already sat down at the table. So the funny thing is I actually pulled up a seat right next to Kevin and put down the voice recorder. So what you're going to hear is going to be a little bit different audio than you're normally hearing, but please bear with it. There's some pretty cool questions that you can hear, and they range from everywhere from the Last Ronin to what's happening in the Lost Years to, why was the original Nintendo game so difficult? So all of that stuff. So enjoy. You'll hear me. I'm probably the second to last question just because we went around the table and then I wasn't sitting at the table. I actually pulled a chair up next to Kevin. So, that was kind of fun, but it's a great little thing. So check out this mini episode, and I appreciate you listening. Thanks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time. Epic Tales from the Sewers.
So I've been loving Last Ronin, and you've introduced, like in the Last Ronin 2, you've introduced the new turtles. Is there, like after this series is done, you going to try to keep going with them, or anything?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It was something that we didn't intend to initially, based on the original idea that Pete and I wrote for Last Ronin in 1987, and when Tom and I adapted it and expanded it, and what became the graphic novel that came out last year, the series and the graphic novel that came out, as we started getting into issue 1, we fell in love with the Ronin-verse, we call it, rather quickly, and so we had this idea of continuing to have adventures in, every character has a multiverse these days. In fact, even it's existed long before the Turtles, and back in the day we had Turtles black and white comics as one universe. We had the animated series as another universe, the cartoons and the movies, which were almost a separate universe. So as part of the multiverse of the Turtles, we wanted to keep going and tell stories in that area. And so we came up with this idea to create more Turtles, 4 new Turtles, 2 males, 2 females. And right now we just finished writing what will be called Re-Evolution when it comes out, but it'll be Last Ronin Part 2. So it'll come out later this year.
Awesome.
That's super fun. Thanks. Yeah, so right now we're doing, Lost Years. And Lost Years was it's a really fun series that covers, within that Ronin-verse, the period where Michelangelo goes to Japan in issue 4, finds out what happened to Splinter and Donatello, just starts walking, and it's a 16-year journey, which brings him back to the Last Ronin issue 1. And so that's the Lost Years. So that's the sort of the prequel part of Lost Years, and the sequel part of Lost Years is because each issue takes place 3 years apart. So we're seeing the new Turtles at age 3 in issue 1, age 6 in issue 2, age 9, and so by the time we get to issue 5, they'll be 15 years old, and that'll take us right into Last Ronin 2.
Oh, perfect. So that's exciting.
It's very exciting. We're having a really, really good time, and that's, the greatest part I like about working with the team I have, Tom Waltz in particular, is all story first, and we took about 6 months, 7 months just to make sure we saw the story we like for that one. So hope you like it.
Oh, I'm loving it so far.
Thank you. Sir.
All right, so are there any characters that you may have fleshed out a bit over the years but never got to use? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about them?
There's the lesser-known Picasso turtle, kind of a deranged cousin that we never... No, there's... No, what was really fun about the early development of the Turtles is one of the first licenses we did before any cartoons or any toys was he did the role-playing game, which was in 1985. And the coolest part about the role-playing game is we needed to develop all kinds of characters for the gameplay. So there was all kinds of different mutants, everything from Bebop and Rocksteady in the earliest stages to a lot of other characters that and then populated the ongoing Turtle series as well as some of the cartoon shows and things like that. And there were a couple in there that I really liked that we never got to explore. And I think the main one was mainly because we thought we'd get our butt suit off was in the first role-playing game we had a cast of characters called the Terror Bears, which is basically the Care Bears, but with little horror images on them. So we never pursued that one, but then I thought that would be a fun one. It's still in the game, I know it's. Thank you. Yes, sir.
First off, 9-year-old me wants to thank you for your creation. I mean, seriously, it meant the world. It was the last toy that I got into as a child. So it went from Transformers to Turtles, and that was it. So my parents, they don't want to thank you because they had to buy every toy for me. So they're still a little bit upset with you. C2e2, I'm talking with my friends, and of course Turtles come up in the hotel room as we're having a few beers. Mm-hmm. We're talking about like the new Rogan movie coming out, and we're like, we're excited for it, but we're like, man, that's for the kids. Like, what about us adults? So we're like, man, is there any plans for like like the Last Ronin, either live action or animated? Mm-hmm. Or like, man, Netflix. Like, I would love to see this adapted. Like, it's a great story, and I know like, if the story's good enough, it's going to sell the books too. Sure. I mean, you look at what's happened with The Boys, and it's just like that's blown up. Series, and James Gunn can mention any movie that he's making, and then all of a sudden they sell out of the trade paperback. So, I mean, I think that it would be fantastic to see it live action or animated.
Thank you. No, it's funny, and it comes up a lot, especially a lot of the fans that come through my line are around your age that grew up on the Turtles. So I make sure to say thank you. I say thank you, and then if your parents are still with us, thank them, because back in the early days of doing signings, it would be the 8 or 9-year-old you and a very disgruntled parent behind there going, you know how much money I spent on those stupid Ninja Turtles, or spent a Christmas Eve trying to put together the sewer playset to keep that blimp inflated.
My dad wanted to pop that blimp.
I know. Terrible. Or stepped on Leonardo's sword on the way to the restroom. I knew in the middle of it. But no, so thank them, please, and thank you. And it was just interesting that just last Friday they announced that Last Ronin video game that they've been working on.
RPG?
A full-on console game.
Okay.
Probably yeah. So they've been talking about. They really fell in love with Last Ronin, and again embracing the multiverse of Turtles. Like Seth Rogen's been working for almost 3 years now on his younger version of the Turtles, which looks really funny, by the way. I've not seen much of it, and I'm excited to sit in the theater and see it for the first time. But it looks great. But they didn't want to, as they sort of put everything into that concept, they didn't want to confuse it and start something with Last Ronin too, because it's pretty edgy. So I think they felt the best way to move forward with it was as a game and embrace the fan base that way. So
we're gonna keep our fingers crossed, though.
Hopefully it'll still. We get Robert Rodriguez or somebody to do it. But thank you. Hi.
So we do a lot of comics, but we also do more movies than comics.
Yeah.
So our audience is nuts.
Yes.
So with the upcoming movie, which audience would be more or would enjoy it? Would it be the comic audience or the movie going audience?
It's. I'm glad you brought it because it is very specific. And even our son Shane, is a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but has never read any of the comics. And our house is, as you can imagine, filled to the floor to ceiling in every room with comics and graphic novels. And Dad, Thanos this and Thanos that. And I go, you want to read the original Jim Stalin? No. So I think it's. What I found in this time is this kind of concept. It's a little of both, in that you have some fans that have only seen the movies and will see it for that. But it is the original fan base, and it's a very precious fan base because if there's a misstep too far to the left or right, like the Michael Bay movies weren't quite what they, in my opinion, what they could have been or should have been. They didn't embrace enough of the concept of what made the Turtles, what we liked about the Turtles, and what you liked about the Turtles. They were, they're Peter Parker and mutations, and so I think that's going to be a little bit of both because they want to protect their childhood, they want to enjoy it, they want to be entertained, and so I think that with this one they will, but it'll be a foot in both worlds. Good question. Thanks.
So you talked a little bit about the new 4 Turtles that are coming up in the lost years that we're seeing come up. The original 4 are so iconic at this point.
Yes.
Like, did you feel any pressure as you were like, we're gonna replace them with this new generation, or like, just how did you go about developing those characters?
I'm still sweating. So no, it's it was a very delicate thing, and it had to approach it very carefully in that you don't want to force it, and that was one of the things. Like, I mentioned Tom Waltz, and Tom and I wrote and worked on 100 issues of the Turtles at IDW from 2011 to 21, and then still involved in that and all things in the Turtles comic universe. And then we teamed up on Last Ronin, and just the concept of approaching how to kill your original characters, and we killed in the flashbacks of how we needed their situations resolved in Last Ronin, all of them, to make it to have the world continue on. So in thinking about the Turtles, it was you immediately go to Planet Stupid, which is like, oh, we'll name them after famous scientists or famous rock stars or something, or there'll be this, and that's when you start crossing all that stuff off the list early, and we talk about it a lot, and we let the story naturally evolve of what kind of personalities they would be. We decided to make them different species of turtles, so they would have stronger and more distinct personalities. We wanted 2 male, 2 female, and their attributes would be more, and their isms, because it's still set in 2055-ish. So the kinds of things that they're going to be used to and acclimated to in not stereotypical form of a personality, but those still personalities would be strong. Things like the names. When we arrived at the names, it was something that again we talked about for months, and you couldn't force it. And what I loved is that Casey Marie, the daughter of Casey Jones and April, is been given Splinter's Journal. She's training the turtles to be ninjas and all things, and she ends up naming them. And it wasn't just made up names like Bob or Susan. She wanted them to be special and embrace each of them, and so each of the turtles' name is number 1 in a different language. So Odin is Ukrainian/Russian for number 1. Uno Moja is Swahili, I think, for number 1. It's South African. Yi is Chinese for number 1. So she basically tells them, "You're all number 1 in my heart." So she names them all number 1. So that was months of thinking, and we feel, you get goosebumps. You go, "Okay, we have it," because it's justified and it works and it makes sense and it works as a story, and that's what we'll build off, because we're figuring out the personalities and figuring them out as we move forward. So, yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the last few years, there seems to have been an increase in the desire for nostalgia, the nostalgia of youth, the nostalgia of what was, and that is part and parcel because of the pandemic, because we were all indoors, and so we were going back to the things that we loved and made our childhood sparkle. Candy was better, toys were better, cartoons were amazing. Was the timing of the release of Last Ronin purposeful, or did it just happen to be this is the way the pendulum fell? And what are your thoughts on that renewed interest in the nostalgia, especially with fresh audiences finding the Turtles with the comics and the movie coming out and the game?
Yeah, no, great question. And the timing was just honestly just complete happenstance. It was just an accident that it was when Peter and I did the original 25-page outline of the concept of became Last Ronin. It was done in 1987, and it was set in 30 years in the future. And when Tom and I were, and the reason we came up with that concept was we had just finished issue 11, and it was wrapping up a big story arc. And so we were like, okay, where do we go from here? And so we said, well, let's set a story that's 30 years in the future, kind of be a lighthouse to navigate towards the final turtle story. But then we never got to it. That year is when the toys started developing, the animated series started developing, and it just got pushed aside, and was never addressed. And so as Tom and I were heading towards issue 100, we arrived at the same situation. Well, we're at issue 100, we've wrapped up a 100-issue storyline. Where do we go from here? And that's when I dusted it out. And it was already 2018, so it was a year past the original when the original story was set. And that's what we then adapted it. So the timing was just naturally, it just evolved as it evolved. But the nostalgia thing is very curious, because I do think it is in part because of some of the pandemic. I think we were shut in. We were reading old books or comics or watching old movies, and just very concerned about what the future is going to be, and remember the happiest times in the past to get us through some of these difficult times. But I've been lucky in that a lot of the shows that my wife and I do all over the world, and we're so grateful to be able to do that, is that most of the people in our line are the original 8, 9, 10-year-old young people that enjoyed them initially, and we've had everything from bringing up dog-eared, chewed-up toys that they have you sign, which is the coolest thing ever, to beat-up comic books that the staples aren't even barely holding together. And what's even more mind-blowing is when they come up with their kids who have discovered the Turtles, because I always say you can't tell a child what's cool and what's not. And the fact that the kids have found something in the Turtles that they love and embrace is like mind-blowing. It's pretty amazing. So it's 40 years next year, and I'm still doing it. It's crazy. Thank you. Yes.
When doing crossover series such as like the one with Batman, Power Rangers, and stuff, like how much input do you actually have, and also what crossover would you like to do that hasn't been done yet?
Great question, and some of it's more and some of it's less. And for example, when Tom and I worked on the Ghostbuster Turtle crossover, we were more involved in that. I was a huge Ghostbuster fan. It was really fun. With the Batman series, I had actually pitched DC. I have a childhood. Somebody's at my door.
I just got the same notification.
Do you live with
That's too funny. With the Batman Turtle crossover, I'd actually pitched another idea to them. I liked this character, DC Jack Kirby character named Commandy, and they said, "Well, nobody knows what Commandy is. Why don't you do Turtles Batman?" And we didn't know that was on the table, you know. And they brought in the most incredible James Tinian, who wrote it, and he's such a fantastic writer.
He's great.
Something is Killing the Children. He's just mind-blowing. He just did a fantastic series, and my good friend Freddie Williams was the artist that brought up the series, and they did such a great job. It was, they did 3 series, but that was one of the big fan moments for me because I got to do the variant covers, and I didn't have any input on it. It was, it's James Tinian. I was like, he's you got it, bro. And when I was doing the cover with Turtles and Batman on the same cover, and I'm thinking they're not even going to print this. This is not really going to. But it was what a joy. And so to answer your last question is Daredevil Turtles would be the ultimate crossover.
Makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
With Venus making her comic book appearance last year, why was that important at that time?
It was, it's something that when I worked on the originals live action series that introduced the original Venus back in '97, it was an idea that started as adding a 5th turtle named Kirby in a 4th live action New Line movie that then was dropped, and then we started developing a new TV series, and it was still this 5th turtle that was sort of washed further down the sewer and that stuff, and developed that. And then at the last minute, Margaret Lesh, who was head of programming, decided to change it to. She wanted to change it to a female turtle, which huge Ripley, Sarah Connor. I love strong female characters, and so it was like, yeah, that'd be great. Peter wasn't as keen on it, so he sort of stepped away, and I worked on that series. It wasn't a huge hit with the fans, but I really liked the series. When Tom and I got into the Congo series, around the time we got to issue 50, one of the ideas that we kept coming back to is we wanted to add a female turtle to the mix. So when we introduced Jenica in issue 51, she then became, not intentionally at first, but then became a catalyst in the character that we were able to evolve into becoming Jenica in issue 95. And then Sophie Campbell, who's just a wonderful writer, an important part of the turtle history, she always loved Venus, and so she wanted to bring it back in this way that was important to the storyline, as almost like a Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas sort of creation by this kind of maniacal doctor. And so it was a neat, interesting version, and she's going to be coming back in a bunch. So, but I'm really thrilled that she found the right story to bring that character back in the way she did.
Awesome, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, neighbor.
I think we both got a pizza delivered at the same time.
First of all, again, thank you for I don't know a life. I'll be 40 next year also, so I don't know a life without Ninja Turtles. So, so this is actually really dope for me.
Thank you.
2 questions. First question is, you talked about the video games. I want to know who made this game and why did they make it so hard?
It was one of those things that I've never, to this day, I've never beat it. But it was in the early day when this first came out. Like people would literally come up to us at Pete and I at a convention and go, why did you make this game so hard? And we're like, I can't even run my VCR. But no, it was kind of a strange thing, and that was one of the first evolutions of that console, the PS1, that whole console system, where so much you couldn't save. You couldn't stop and save the game at any point. You had to start at the beginning every time, and it was like I was so grateful when they finally came out with the arcade game, because then you could something I could play, but then you could also play with 3 of your other friends, which was great. But they kind of the evolution of like Turtles in Time and some of the other games that they came after was great. But man, that was a
pain in the ass.
It was a pain. It was a huge pain in the ass.
I could personally tell you that.
You know what's funny? Last year they came out with they call it the Cowabunga Collection, which is all the games and all the versions. And that was one of the things that the developers, when I talked to them, they said that they made it. This version is updated and it's got a save feature. So you can save it. Thanks. Thank you.
So not only am I a huge Ninja Turtles fan and have been since I was a kid, but also a huge Power Rangers fan. I'm kind of pegging back off to the crossovers. Power Rangers celebrating 30 years this year, Ninja Turtles celebrating 40, and you did the cover for the first Ninja Turtles Power Rangers crossover comic, and now you're doing all the variants for the second series with Freddie Williams. So how do you feel about that series and these two iconic, long-lasting superhero franchises coming together like this?
It's awesome. I really have been enjoying it. And we actually, even going back to that original live-action Venus series, one of the specials that we did during that live-action was we did a Turtles crossover live-action version, which was really fun. But no, it's that nostalgia thing, as mentioned earlier, that it's really wonderful. Those characters are iconic, and we battled for ratings many years, and it was hit that same tonality that our fans love. And so the fact that you got guys like Dan Mora who's here just killing it with the artwork, and Jason, I enjoy the series very much, not only just as being a fan of both of them and seeing them together, but it amazes me that when these incredibly talented young people come up with a fresh idea and something that just you think every idea has been explored, and there's no way that they can come up with something else. They come up with something else, and it's even cooler than what they've done before. So it's really been a treat for me in doing those, and plus getting to work with Freddie on those covers is a hoot. So.
Yeah, very cool.
Thanks.
Just wanted to jump in and that we're going to give like a 5 to 8 minute warning.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yes, because
we're going to give her the
that's right. Because I'm signing at 11, right? So thank you so much. Appreciate you. And I'm having a great time sitting with you guys. So we'll get to as many questions as we can, but thank you. Thanks.
2 quick questions. Do you have any plans for future collaboration with Stan Sakai?
Can work with Stan every day for the rest of my life. He's not only the coolest guy in comics, the nicest guy in comics, and we're doing the new series now, the Where When story, which would be a 5-issue series. I'm doing covers for him, and he wants to do another one. But Stan also, as you know, probably for sure, is Turtles issue 1 came out in May of '84, and the first appearance of Usagi was in Critters number 2 in November of '84. And I always love telling this story because that's how we first met Stan. Is we would go to conventions, and they go, "Okay, funny animal guys, we've got a couple of tables next to the bathrooms. So you guys are over there." Like, they put everybody else there, and then put us over in the corner next to like the flaming carrot guy, and that stuff. But we had that's where we got to meet Stan and hang out, and Usagi was very early on. We did crossovers, and then we're lucky enough to bring him in to the Turtle universe, not only as a toy and cartoon, but also preserve. And we wouldn't have done it any other way. Like Dave Garcia's PandaCon and other ones, that they retained full ownership. They became part of our universe and had some success in that, but they retained their own. But yeah, Stan's the great. So there's going to be more to come.
Excellent. Real quick though, Daredevil Turtle crossover. What would that look like?
I've got an idea. And I'm no joke, and it's like I'm not going to tell you, unfortunately. But no, I literally have a story idea I wrote in 1988, and it's something I want to do, and it makes sense, and it fits together, and it's one of those things that Freddie and I, because Freddie and I are really good friends, and it's funny, I love Freddie because the first time I met him, he goes, we're going to be best friends because our birthdays are on the same day, May 30th. And as oddly enough, we turned out to be really good friends. But so we've been talking about this idea of sort of dusting off and doing it. But it's a matter of, right now, we're still pretty surprised by the success of, and very grateful, as you can imagine, the success of Last Ronin and the development of, we really want to keep a focus on finishing Lost Years and then starting Last Ronin 2, and that's that focus. But that's, I'm having a blast, and I got my first Daredevil cover. Did you see that? So, yeah,
that was awesome. Yeah.
40 years later, the stack of rejection letters from Marvel. It's like, don't give up your day job, Marvel. But now,
day job in the multiverse.
I just see. We're going to stay in the pizza parlor. But no, it's been great. So, thanks. Do we got time for another one or two, or? Yeah. You want to do this gentleman, then you? Okay. And then.
Hi, Justin, Epic Tales from the Sewers podcast.
Nice to see you.
Congratulations on the Daredevil cover. That was what I was going to say first.
Thank you very much.
There was a series in the 90s called Legend of the Dark Knight Batman. It was non-canonical. It was all these little vignettes and stories, not quite in Elseworlds.
Yeah.
But what about the idea for something like that in IDW, where you bring in all these great artists, people like Mike Ruth or Gavin Smith, even though he's doing other stuff.
I love Gavin Smith.
And you get these guys in there to do these stories that are just small, self-contained, like Turtle Soup when that came out. Is that something that is at all on the table?
That would be something I'd love. It is something that, because even, for Peter in the early days, it came out as a nice collection, and Ultimate Collection Volume 6 was all the short stories. Anytime we did a reprint of Turtles, we would include a new backup, which was some of the Mirage artists, Mike Dooney and Mark Bodie and Ryan Brown and all those guys. And I love the short story format because you could really dip into an idea and have a blast and get out quickly. And but I know that we just finished an editorial session last week and talking about a number of things that we want to pursue on the publishing side, and that was one that did come up because everybody's enjoyed the success of, as I have, the Black, White, and Red or Black, White, and Blood series, and they were talking about doing a Black, White, and Green maybe or something with the Turtles, but that would be, to me, I think that it's always fun to me to see what another artist, writer sees in the characters and what they want, kind of story that they want to tell. That's inspiring, and if it's really good, I take credit for it, and if it's not.
Can you take any credit for the idea of the Stranger Things comic book that's coming up, Stranger Things crossover?
No, that was just a crazy idea that because Playmates approached us about doing a turtle package like the Cobra Kai or the Karate Kid crossover series, Cobra Kai crossover toy series. Stranger Things came up because it kind of fell in the same the early Stranger Things took place in '84, around that time, and so I've not seen any material on that, but I'm curious to see what it is. So I think one more we got good, and then we might have to.
Did you really buy a King?
Yeah, yes, I did.
I've always wondered.
Yes.
Did you drive it?
Oh yeah. It was in short, it was I was a big fan of I liked a lot of the war comics, and when I was growing up, Sergeant Rock and Sergeant Fury and so many of these things, and there was one called the Haunted Tank, which was this tank crew that had a M15A Stuart light tank, and so one time I was in Hollywood working on something in this company that provides military vehicles for movies. I said, "Hey, you got a M15A Stuart light tank?" And he goes, "Yep." And I go, "You do? How much?" He goes, $35,000. And I'm like, I'll buy it. I had turtle money at the time. Back in the day. So it was served in 1945 in World War II, and it was brought here, and it was used last used on camera in the Red Dawn movie. Ooh. The original Red Dawn movie. Go over, the original Red Dawn movie, and then and you could drive it. It had twin Cadillac engines, and it ran like a bulldozer. You braking lots of treads. And I had a place in Massachusetts. I used to drive around, scare the neighbors. So I know you. I promise you one last question. We'll do that and we'll wrap up. Okay.
Actually, two quick ones.
Okay, sure.
All right, two quick ones. So it was mentioned earlier about Venus' return. Big fan of Jenica.
Thank you.
Could we perhaps be seeing more team-ups with them, possibly in the book on their own sometime in the future?
There's definitely been a discussion on doing that, and I think it's just bandwidth. Not only we don't want to burden the creative people that are working on it, but also the fans. You guys are. We want to make sure that the stuff we're delivering is these comics aren't cheap these days, and and it's so it's just sort of managing it that make sure one the stories are good and two that it's on a fashion that it still bothers me to a certain extent. I think there's a few too many variant covers going on these days, and especially for there's people that just want the book for the book, and then there's the collectors, which we love them dearly, and it's a lot.
And then last one.
Yep.
Since we're all talking nostalgia, again, I grew up on Rangers and Turtles as well. And I hope it hasn't been asked already. But have you thought about how it all ends? I am in no way advocating it. Have you thought about when I'm done, what's that final battle going to look like?
Well, the final vision I have, and I was joking with somebody about this, it's like, on my gravestone, it's going to be, you say like cowabunga, then there'll be like a hand reaching out with a Sharpie as I'm signing my own gravestone. I'll be at a convention and I'll be like, thank you. I've got to try to beat Stan Lee. Stan Lee was still doing it, 90?
Yeah.
95? Anyway, but no, it's a good question. That's a great one to end on because it's you have to go back to the concept that we never thought would sell the 3,000 copies we printed of issue 1. The fact that 40 years later, next year, May of 2024, will be 40 years that we put that first issue out, and the fact that I'm here talking to you guys about Turtles and talking about still new Turtle ideas, mind-blowing. It's quite humbling, to be honest. It's pretty awesome. It's a childhood dream, and I was drawing comics last week before I came here, and when I get home tomorrow night, I've got 2 covers too. I'll be back on the drawing board tomorrow night.
It was humbling to me.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you guys. So
I know you're having time to.
We don't. I know we're on at 11, right, Mike?
It's pizza time.
And now, in a segment that we call Pizza Time, where we discuss any Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle or pizza-related food, I give you Pizza Time. Now, for your Pizza Time of the day, I give you pepperoni and sweet pickle pie. This makes one 12-inch pizza. Pepperoni and pickles are the perfect mashup of salty and sweet, chewy and crisp. Want to go all out savory? Swap the bread and butter pickles for dill slices instead. Then get ready to do some serious damage to this delectable pie. Ingredients: cornmeal or flour for dusting, extra virgin olive oil for greasing, 1 pound ball pizza dough, homemade or store-bought, 2/3 cup of New York-style pizza sauce, 3/4 cup shredded low-moisture mozzarella cheese, 22 to 24 pepperoni slices, and 1/2 to 1 cup bread and butter pickle chips. Lighten it up, dudes. Use whole wheat pasta or whole wheat pizza dough instead and low-fat mozzarella. Instructions: on a pizza baking stone or steel pizza peel, place your baking stone in the middle rack of the oven with preheat to 500 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 30 minutes. Then turn the oven to broil. Dust the pizza peel or inverted baking sheet with cornmeal or flour. On a baking sheet, preheat the oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit with a rack in the middle position. Lightly coat with a heavy-duty rimmed baking sheet with olive oil. Step 1. Stretch or roll the dough into a 12-inch disc and place it on the prepared pizza peel or baking sheet. Step 2. Spoon the sauce onto the dough and spread it out in an even layer, leaving 1/2 inch border from the dough all around. Step 3. Sprinkle on half the cheese and then arrange the pepperoni and pickles on top. Finish with the remaining cheese. Step 4. Shimmy the dough from the peel to the hot baking stone or transfer the baking sheet to the oven. Step 5. Bake until the crust is golden, the cheese begins to brown in spots, about 6 to 10 minutes in the baking stone, or 10 to 15 minutes on the baking sheet. Step 6. Remove the pizza from the oven, let it rest for 5 minutes, then slice and serve. This has been your Pizza Time for the day, pepperoni and sweet pickle pie.
Cowabunga, dudes!
Thank you for listening to the Epic Tales from the Sewers podcast. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. This podcast has no affiliation with Eastman, Laird, Mirage Studios, IDW Studios, Archie Comics, or Nickelodeon Studios. This podcast is a member of the Dorkening Podcast Network. Check out thedorkening.com for other podcasts. Epic Tales from the Sewers is recorded by Justin Cooper and Eric Will.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. We have very active lifestyles. It's not all wandering the countryside aimlessly or scaring passing motorists. And we all love a good cup of joe. And there's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. Bold, robust, delicious. It's coffee that can wake the dead. With over a dozen different roasts and flavors, Deadly Grounds can satisfy the most finicky of coffee addicts. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
It took me 10 years to make the perfect man cave.
And then we took it over. And we made it into the multiversal chamber.
Then I started my own podcast.
And we took that over too. And we're the co-hosts, the Multiverse Kids.
Yeah, and I'm the dad, the geeky dad. And every week, we what?
We review the movies, shows, and books. Games and toys.
Yeah, and sometimes we even have a special guest. So, join us every week on the Geeky Dad Podcast.
Greetings and shabebans. We are the Retro Reductibus Cephala Podcast, a long-form bi-weekly show that celebrates all the things that made growing up awesome.
Well, that sounds good, but I don't know what all those words mean.
I think what Parasite seems trying to say is that on Retro Reductibus, we explore a range of retro goodness, from toys, video games, and movies, to cartoons, and even snacks and school lunches.
Oh. And we do it all with a positive spin, a slew of killer guests, and some very adult language.
And you know what else is cool?
No.
This crazy show is part of the Dorkening Podcast Network with new episodes every Technical Tuesday.
What's that?
And if waiting 2 weeks for a new episode gives you a sad, know that we drop bonus episodes all the time, like the off-format Crow's Nest and an interview series we call The Brick.
You can listen to Retro Reductibus on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any app that's cool enough to carry the only show that celebrates all the things that make growing up awesome.
Hey, it's your man, Velvet J. Come join me and my co-hosts on our weekly journey through the world of comic books on the Splash Pages Comic Book Club podcast. We'll explore new stories, even have guests like the Empress of the Bat, Legacy Athena Finger, voiceover artist Charlie Schlatter, actor Mitcher Whitfield, comic creators Joe St. Pierre and Tony Harris. Explore dork-related news and updates from the world of comics and collectibles. Where can you check us out? We are live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube or streaming on deaddorkradio.com, or wherever you find your favorite dorkening podcasts.
Hello, intrepid listeners. This is the Generation Playlist Podcast, a podcast about music where we are your guides through a particular group or artist.
We talk about the music, and then we make a customized playlist to share with you, our listener. And you can check us out wherever you listen to podcasts and find our playlists on Spotify.